Hello and welcome to your free lesson for myfreeactingclass.com. Today is Thursday, October 29th, and I am Michael Bean, acting teacher, founder of this project, and diehard. I've been looking at the videos from the last couple of weeks, which I'm finally getting caught up on posting. So anybody who's here in the lesson, if you want to go on YouTube, there's some of those past lessons up there. It's wonderful for me to go back and look at those lessons because, and I find this with teaching often, is that the best things that I offer are typically prompted by your questions. That I was like, really, like, am I just covering the same stuff over and over and over again? And then watching the videos, even from a couple of weeks ago, I'm pleasantly surprised. And so thank you for continuing to show up and throwing your good questions my way. So this is Thursday. We're going to start with Ask Me Anything. And so please feel free to jump in with your questions, either just unmute yourself and chat them out, or pop them in the chat window. And then I've got something that we can work on after that, should you so desire. But what is on your acting mind today? What would you like me to talk about? Yeah, Eve, go ahead and jump in.
Could you just talk a little bit about your process or a process that you think is effective of like getting into your character?
Absolutely. This is something that's really been on my mind lately, I think because we were looking at Ivana Chubbuck's work last week and her sort of very clearly articulated process. Can I ask a clarifying question? When you say getting into your character, what is it that you mean?
I still don't really have a clear idea myself of exactly how it's supposed to be, but maybe just the general feeling of what your character is like, or how they're experiencing the certain thing in the scene.
And so I think that before I can answer your question, we actually have to talk about your question, because I think that your question comes from that kind of outside perspective where it looks like somebody is becoming another person. And so I think that your answer is really instructive. That what you're asking about is making choices or understanding the scene from the inside. It sounds like your question maybe is also about then internalizing some of those choices or understandings about the story, so that you can tell that story. And then your question, I didn't hear this, but your question may also be like, how do I feel like that other person, or like I'm in that other place? And all three of those are different and wonderful questions. Did I get that right, Eva? Am I missing anything important?
No, that sounds great. Yeah, I think the second one that you said talked about was really what I meant, but all of them are great.
Great. So not just like I understand story a little bit, I've talked about making choices, but then how do I internalize those choices? Like, what's the process from like, cool, I've made my decisions, to now I want to get them in my body. Yeah. And this is where I think there's another split into how would you know? Like, how would you know if they were in your body? And I think that it's important for each actor, to make the decision about like, would we know because we would watch the tape and it would look and sound like they were in your body? Or is it a feeling that you're after? Is it something that you need to feel? Because I will say that that character, in my opinion, or maybe in my experience as an actor, that character is an illusion. That character is an illusion that we are working very hard to craft for other people. That you are still you, and you are still bringing true aspects of yourself and your experience of life, and that it is the imaginary circumstances, it is the words that are not yours, it is the emotional weight that your character gives to something that might be different than the emotional weight you give to that exact thing, that helps tell that story. But for me, I no longer um, put the same amount of pressure on myself to try and become the character in the internal sense. I want to feel the character's feelings, that, you know, the personalization. I want to go on the ride. Yeah, I want to, you know, I want to feel the anger in the scene and feel the sadness in the scene. Um, but I don't need to ever lose sight of the fact that I'm in front of a blue screen in my own home. Right. And I think that we talk about actors, and particularly superlative news articles, the ones that talk about actors as though what they're doing is magical. Really, they love the illusion. And of course, we love magic. Like, we want to be swept up in it. But they love the illusion that the actor's truly becoming another person just because they've changed the way they walk, or they changed the way they talk, or, you know, they are responding, or because they do lots of improv, or because they are, you know, insert whatever some um, media person has gotten excited about in terms of a specific actor's process. But the actor, if the actor ever stops being in reality, where in this moment I'm in front of my computer in front of a blue screen, that's called a psychotic break. When my reality diverges from consensus reality, that's called psychosis. That's not acting, it's psychosis. And psychotic people are very unlikely to stand on their marks and say all of the lines that they are supposed to say while looking exactly where they're supposed to look and doing an extremely complex set of technical skills. Very unlikely. You know, and so just to talk about this process to yourself in a way that demystifies it a little bit is where I would start to answer your question. To say, okay, I want to feel the character's feelings, you know, and that's one set of skills. And I want to tell the character's story, and it's a different set of skills, you know, a lot of which is technical. You know, and so when I'm approaching a piece of work, I do a certain amount of thinking about story. Obviously, you've seen me go through my 10 story questions, and, you know, we're going to look at those today with the Reaper scene if we have time. You know, or you can watch the video from yesterday. Uh, and then if I'm actually working with my coach right now to go over an audition scene from a couple of months ago. You know, I was like, you know, my self tapes, you know, they're skilled, but there's something missing. I want to go back to them. I want to rework them. You know, like, help me get some insight. And so I'm actually in the process of doing this myself, and um, it's not something that I'm like, oh yeah, it's effortless. You know, there's always a process of uncovering for me. You know, so I went through my own story questions, you know, with the script that I'm working on. And then when I got to the objective phrase, you know, I just started playing with things out loud until I found something that fit the story arc that I discussed with my coach, uh, and just activated me more. And I just kept trying things out loud, you know, talking like a crazy person out loud to myself in my kitchen, until I'm like, oh yeah, that one makes me feel more. You know, and so what takes me into the feeling, you know, is finding something that helps me remember, here's where, how I experience that feeling in my life, even if it doesn't make perfect sense, you know, and here are words that help me bring that to the circumstances of the story. You know, and so that's very often the tool that I start with actors. You know, and I've taught, Christina asked about this the other day, and from this past summer, I taught an entire lesson on this sort of like threefold, you know, way into emotion, you know, of, okay, I'm going to imagine it, I'm going to find it in my own life, you know, I'm going to, you know, like, sort of create it, you know, or like find it in my body, right? I'm going to find it in my imagination, I'm going to find it in my, you know, personal history, I'm going to find it in my body. That for me, those three access points seem to work. And so just a reminder of that as far as like the tools of getting the feeling into my body. And then in terms of telling the character's story, and creating those circumstances, that's where wardrobe goes a long way, where sometimes I'll just make decisions about what I'm seeing out here and how I feel about those things. Right? That Michael Biehn, the actor, I never forget that I'm in my kitchen right now, with a blue screen behind me. You know, but I can make decisions about, oh, there's the hallway, to my child's room, and like even as I'm talking to Claudine in the scene, I just want to make sure that the door is still closed and they're still asleep. And actually, that's going to also remind me to keep my voice down, so that I don't talk too loud and wake up my son who's sleeping down the hallway. And that's the kind of thing. It's those little details that bring us into the world of the story, that are technical, or at least there's a technical element of deciding them, and then this sort of graceful imagination practice of putting them into practice, of going, okay, I'm here, I'm going to feed my system some things, then I'm going to pretend that I'm really there and it's really happening. Did that work? Okay, I didn't get quite the result I wanted. What do I need to feed the system? Like what kind of input do I need to put here so that I get the result that I want? And I think that it requires, in my opinion, doing one of those jobs at a time. I think that with vulnerability in general, the hope is, the desire is, like, if only I do it right, I don't have to be vulnerable. Right? Like if I know exactly how to make all the decisions, I can just do it perfectly the first time and be awesome the first time. And I don't think that that's actually possible, especially while you are learning the inputs on the system. But even once you know the system, if you are wanting to do the most skilled work you're capable of, then you're always at your edge a little bit. You're always like, well, I know that works, but what if I wanted more than I'm used to? Like, this is what I do, where I'm like, yeah, right? Like, it was a technically skilled read. It was, but I want to feel it. Like, oh, just give me more, And so I accept that when I'm practicing that, some of the time I'm going to watch it later and it's going to feel false, right? That I'm going to try things that don't work in the process of figuring out what does work. And I hate that. I was like, I should, by saying I accept it, that makes it sound like I accept it emotionally. I don't accept it emotionally. I resist it. I avoid it. I'm like, oh, I'll do the practice tomorrow. I'm going to get online and tell my students that they should practice every day. But like, today is just not the right day for me, right? Like any artist, run into resistance, do not love resistance, have my own ways of sort of moving through it and doing the practice anyway. I feel, Eve, like I've given an exceptionally long answer to your very short question, which is consistent with my teaching in general. Is there any piece of what I've just said that you want me to talk more about? Just so that I'm kind of honing in on the part that is of most interest to you.
I think that was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can always, if you post this one on YouTube, I can always go
Separation of talent and skill.
Sorry, if I post this one on YouTube?
If you post this one on YouTube, I can always go back and watch it and stuff too.
I'm going to post it tonight because I can't get behind the way I have in the last couple of weeks, or else then I fall into my own resistance patterns and dread them. What I'm actually finding now that I am posting them is that, like, they're a joy to look back and review. Each one only takes a couple of minutes, and I am baffled by how much resistance I have felt over the last couple of weeks to be like, oh, uploading things. It's my problem. But this is the nature of being in like an emotional body, is to like find the way to acknowledge the feeling, move through, and do the thing anyway. Now, the reason that you suddenly heard a lady's voice talking is that I wanted to play you a clip from the book by a woman named Angela Duckworth called Grit. Every actor I know should read this book or listen to it. It's called The Power of Passion and Perseverance. Right, so I've talked about in this lesson about Kay Anders Ericsson's work around mastery, right? If Eve, you I know are somewhere in the Greater Vancouver area. If you have a library card, the Vancouver Public Library has an app called Overdrive that will let you download audiobooks. And I'm gonna be done this one in a couple of days and return it, and you can get yourself first on the list for it if you want. But like, it doesn't have to cost you anything to engage with this book. I got mine from the library. This is a library copy. I'm just taking notes. I don't know. If it feels useful enough, then I will purchase myself a copy so I can show it off to students and read them quotes. And otherwise, I will cherry pick the 3 ideas that seem most meaningful to me and move forward with my life, which is what I often do. But she is a very distinguished researcher and psychologist in the States, who the body of her work essentially boils down to why dedication to a particular goal or idea trumps talent. And so it's sort of like somebody wrote an entire book and devoted her life's research to this thing that I've said here in these lessons, which is that there is an inherent bias in the world, towards innate talent that is not helpful for actors and not accurate. It is definitely there, and she talks about it in detail. And she also talks in detail and takes an evidence-based scientific approach to sort of the people who are achieving, because she studies achievement, and her goal in life is to understand achievement and make it easier for young people to achieve. The effort that somebody puts in, I think what she said earlier in the book that I really landed, she's like, talent counts, and for her, talent is how quickly you pick up a skill. She's like, talent counts, but effort counts twice. And I love that. I love that. Like, in her equation, really, like, of course talent counts. Like, how, if we look at talent in the definition of aptitude, right? How quickly somebody picks something up. But the idea that effort counts twice, oh, that makes me happy. It makes my teacher heart happy. And yes, confirmation bias is real, and this does line up with what I already believe, but I like it. And it is backed up by my experience as a teacher, where I see the students who just love it enough to continue practicing over time, not because they should, but because they want to. Get substantially better than the ones who pick something up fast and then move on to something else. So here's 45 seconds from Angela Duckworth's book, Grit.
The separation of talent and skill, Will Smith has pointed out, is one of the greatest misunderstood concepts for people who are trying to excel, who have dreams, who want to do things. Talent you have naturally. Skills only developed by hours and hours and hours of beating on your craft. I would add that skill is not the same thing as achievement either. Without effort, your talent is nothing more than your unmet potential. Talent is nothing more than your unmet potential. Without effort, your skill is nothing more than what you could have done but didn't. With effort, talent becomes skill, and at the very same time, effort makes skill productive.
Isn't that great? And that's the end of chapter 3, right? I got 8 more hours of this audiobook to go. So we'll see. I mean, it might go off the rails halfway through, but I'm inspired at the beginning. Candy or Claudine, did you have questions that you wanted to jump in with? It is Thursday.
I did want to ask a couple of things actually, but
Please.
one of them, it's just when the kids do their self-tape, I've seen quite a few different self-tapes with different kids, and they're all looking in a different place. because I know you're not supposed to look in the barrel. What is the best position for a child to do a self-tape? Is it like looking straight ahead, so you can see both ears straight ahead, and so you just get a slight little point off the barrel, just slightly, but sometimes it still looks like they're looking down the barrel?
Yes, well, and so especially if you're operating the camera, you do have to check, right? Like
Yeah,
but I mean, thankfully, Christian's got you to do that. So
yeah.
for me, like with my laptop, I use the corners of my laptop screen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so but is your face turned slightly to look at that as though you're talking to someone there, or are you sitting here and just
Oh no,
trying to
I will turn, and I will even encourage, and I will especially strongly encourage people to orient their entire body towards their eye line. A thing that I see in actors all the time, and I think it comes from years and years and years of people having photographs taken of them and orienting their body towards the camera, is they orient their body towards the camera and then they just turn their face here. And it's very rare if I'm talking to you that my shoulders are going to be facing over here. It's very rare. It's very odd, and so just that like couple of degrees, even if it's that, right? Even if I'm choosing an eyeline, right? So I can orient the eyeline in whatever way I like for the tape. I think it's a good idea to take like a 10-second test clip once you've got set up, and then just look at that, right? So that you're not doing an hour of tape and then going, oh man, we forgot to check the eyelines, or we forgot to check the sound, which, like, trust me, I've done, and then had to completely redo sessions where I was the actor or I was the coach. It sucks. But just do a test clip and play with like putting the zoom window to one side or the other, right? So if I use you as my eyeline, I can get out of full screen. I can just drag the window over here, and maybe I'm like, actually, I like this angle better today, or this one's better because I also want to like talk to the whole class over here, and I want to tell the story that like you're off, they're off the side a little bit. What you're looking for is like so many students, I would say it sounds like you were looking for the one definite answer. And the reason that there isn't one definite answer is because it is contextual.
Yeah. No, I wanted to check with that because I've learned from you guys to, you can like talk to someone slightly there and talk to someone there, to change the emotion and who you're talking to.
Yes.
But then other people have been told by their agent or a casting director to just be straight on, but just find one spot, kind
Yes.
of thing. So, what is best to do?
I think that we want to be able to see both of your eyes as clearly as possible. I think that in the absence of somebody who, like yourself, is doing the research to have context, to take a nuanced approach to it, right? Like if I'm dealing with a parent who needs a one-sentence answer and I'm a talent agent and I don't have any teaching energy or want to spend any, I'm just going to say, don't look right at the camera, but face the camera.
Right.
Super clear. It's one sentence. They don't ever have to think about it again. They can move on.
Okay.
And so my guess is that's why people in your circle are getting that answer.
Okay. Yeah, that would probably make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that they just don't have the bandwidth to learn the more complex answer, which is, yes, very close to the camera, one side of the camera or the other, and there is no perfect angle for your face as long as I can see both of your eyes. Like once I get about here, right, this eye is starting to get cut off, and so I would say that's probably too far.
Right. Okay.
If I'm doing the bulk of the scene, I probably don't want to be so far that like my nose is cutting off my eye there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. That's good.
I have one actor who's in my class who is sending a lot of tapes to Los Angeles, and she trained herself to use the side of the camera box, which is like right beside the camera, right? Like right beside the camera, and it was her conviction that that was what was expected in LA. And it did mean that, like, because she picked an eyeline that was really, really close to camera, that we saw a lot of her eyes, in the tape. It was a really interesting technical experiment. I would say that as far as best practices go, some people say, yes, always do that. It's the most important, only thing to do, and you know that I often resist answers like that.
Okay, all right.
And you had more questions.
Yeah, so the other question was, when you get a brief and they can be like really specific. So you follow that brief and then you find out that people that didn't follow the brief are actually been chosen as favourites. They actually so what happened is that nobody was allowed to show emotion, but then in fact the kids that showed emotion were the ones that ended up being the favourites. So they specifically would say no emotion whatsoever, but then the ones that did show the emotion, they ended up liking.
Yes.
So what are you supposed to do there? Because you can only send one. I mean, you could probably sneak in a second choice with emotion, but
unless they've explicitly said, only send one choice, then I think that you always can send it second choice. It just better be good, right? Like if you send a second choice that's identical or very nearly identical, to your first choice, you'd be better off sending one. So that definitely, so again, you have the answer to your own question, or you'll have an answer to your own question, which is that you can do that. And then the larger question of how do you make sense of decision makers who say, we only want it like this. Oh, actually, this thing where people broke the rules is actually our favorite. We changed our mind. Like, how do you make sense of that? It's like, is that, baffling and frustrating? Of course it is, but I would encourage you to use that as support for this basic idea of there is no strict rule, right? You have to assess these things in context. Just remember how much fear they're packing, when they're writing these breakdowns, when they're saying like, especially for large calls or open calls, like here's what we want. I've seen ones that are like, don't overact, but also don't underact. It's very real, but it's also nuanced. And they're basically just listing their fears. They're like, don't be bad at acting. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like, I get it. Thank you for writing this out for all of the young people who have never bothered to think about it. They're just sort of getting their own fears out on the page. Right. I think that I like to go back to, with a breakdown, the advice of my friend Rekha Sharma, who was a guest here a couple of months ago, who said, I just decide that if they're calling me for the audition, they want me. And they want my version of this story. And so an over acceptance of the rules, doesn't get you anywhere if it's not a good story. And if it's not your story, right? Right. So, and there are 100 ways to interpret something that says like, don't show emotion. Are they saying don't show too much emotion? Or are they saying something that's kind of more in line with Eve's question, which is like, okay, I'm not just going to not show emotion as like a result, because then I'm playing a result and I don't want to do that in my scene anyway. I'm going to read the breakdown for information. Okay, it says don't show emotion. And then I'm going to think, why is this person not showing emotion? Is it because they're scared? Because I can play scared and then it'll probably leak out, in interesting little ways. Or is it because they're trying to be so strong? In that case, what's going on underneath that? And can I bring both of those into the scene? Can I bring the, whatever's underneath the, I'm trying to be tough? And can I bring in the, I don't want anybody to see how I'm feeling? But if I just play the surface of it, which is no feeling, the risk is that people experience my work as flat. So that's like using that one as a specific example. And because you didn't give me any context, I have no idea if my unpacking of it is in any way useful or relevant. But that specific note, could mean anything from we actually are hiring you to play an android. I live in Vancouver, BC, and so there's a lot of sci-fi shows here. So it could actually mean we're hiring you to play an android, We don't want any micro expressions of feeling, so we want you to express your feeling only through like physical behavior. And it could also mean the character has like strong personal beliefs or rules around not showing feeling, or trauma, or like a history, of not showing feeling. In which case, like, where are the moments in the scene where you have to struggle to keep it together? Because watching somebody struggle to keep it together, super interesting, right? Watching an actor who is actively trying to feel, very much not interesting because it's not reflective of life. Right? Some of the most moving performances that I've seen from students in class, are the ones where the feeling is so big that the actor has to actively work hard, to make sure that they're getting their point across and they're being understood, right? Like where the feeling is obstacle and they're still focused on like, I need you to understand me, or I want to be seen, or I want to be heard, or I want to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. Is any of that useful, Claudine?
Okay, yeah, no, definitely about make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
They've called you in, so yeah.
Yeah, so they want you, right? Like, and they want your version of the character who doesn't show much feeling, or who doesn't show any feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also reminded of like long ago advice. I'm trying to remember the like, and particularly with self-tapes, I think this is really relevant, is that you can break the rules, right? Like, it's a self-tape. You can break the rules. It's just that if you do, it better be good. And right, and so that's a gamble. And if some of those people like gambled in a way that paid off, then just like lottery winners, I think the risk is of over focusing on them because their story is very interesting and very sticky, and we don't see the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who decide to break the rules in ways that make casting directors facepalm and just go like, we told them not to do that. Like, what were they thinking? Right? Those stories aren't interesting enough to be told and retold. And so it seems like, or it may seem like, actors who break the rules like are successful more often. And I don't think that's reflective of my experience, broadly speaking. I will say like actors who tell good stories and put themselves in them, for sure. But actors who explicitly do the thing that they're told not to in a breakdown, I'm glad it worked for those guys. It's not something that I would recommend in general. So maybe that's a little bit more to your point and more helpful.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. Maybe I'll have to send it to you.
Oh yeah, I would love that. Right, Monday is self-tape review. I love the idea of self-tape review, and I don't know if any of you remember, but a month or two ago, I showed you a tape of Ira Glass. His and he was like sort of reviewing one of his own recordings and talking about it in context. And I was like, oh, I could do that. So on Monday, if I don't have other people's self-tapes to review, I think I'll pull one of my own from a decade ago and just cut it to pieces, for all of your benefit. So that you can see the skills, but you don't have to be putting yourself, up in front of it if you don't want to. And I would love to see another one of Christian's tapes, or Candy or Eve, or Caden. If you have a self-tape, I would love to include those in Monday's self-tape review. Okay, we ran a little bit over because you had such good questions. Thanks for your questions. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.